Hey guys, Luke here. So we're down on the beach in Cabo Verde for the first stop of the GKA World Tour, and we thought what better time to start making some strapless kiteboarding tutorials than here on the beach in Cabo Verde. And so in this video we're going to talk about the absolute basics of strapless. If you've been thinking about going strapless riding out there, you see other people doing it and you want to get into it, this video is just covering the real basics so you can go and give it a go and have some fun as well. Of course, we love strapless kiteboarding, and I think if you give it a turn you are going to absolutely love it as well. You might end up selling your twin tip. That's definitely what we ended up doing. So first of all, let's talk about some equipment and sort of how it works in general, and then I'll give you some tips to get out on the water today and try it for yourself. So you can see going strapless, typically it's riding a directional style surfboard. Now, kiteboard manufacturers make kite specific directional boards, but of course you can see it's very much just a surfboard, and the kiteboards are typically just reinforced, so they're a bit stronger to handle the extra pressure that you might be doing when you're kiteboarding. They're directional, so it means that they have fins on one end and a nose on the other, and so you ride it in that direction only. So this is unlike the twin tip where they're symmetrical and you ride them in both directions, backwards and forwards. This one you ride in this direction, then the board turns around and you ride it back in the other direction, like a directional board. Now, one thing that a lot of people sort of ask is, how do you stay on the board? And so you'll probably find when your very first time, you'll be surprised just how easy it is. Because when you think about the forces that are applied when kiting, and you've got your board down, you're sort of leaning back, foot's on the deck, okay? And so, and the kite's sort of pulling you like this. And so what's happening is all of the force is being applied straight onto the deck. And so when you think about your twin tips, really it's not your straps that are keeping you on the board. It's that you're standing down on the deck of the board, right? You're forcing down, standing on top of it. And so that's the same with the strapless. So you'll find that it's actually quite easy to ride around. Just if you're familiar with kiteboarding twin tip, it's very, very similar. The only time that your straps really play a big role in your twin tip is when you fly through the air. And so that sort of leads me to the next point, and that is, when riding strapless, you have to be mindful of your kite control. So you're really trying to manage your speed, manage your power, particularly going over waves or going over swells and chops, because it will sort of, if your kite lifts you up, you'll carry away from your board, and that is, you know, much of the reason that it is strapless. So two things really there is that you'll be surprised that it is actually quite easy to stand on your board, and when you give it a go for the first time, I think you're going to agree. But then also secondly, if you're going too fast and you go over a big like swell or wave, you're going to fly away from your board. So really try and think about managing your speed in those situations, slowing down, sort of leaning back a little bit, and you know, I think that's going to go a long way for getting you riding across the water, having a good session. Okay, so now let's put up the kite and I'll show you some tips for how you can take off into the water, and we'll also talk about turning around out there. So first, let's get down to the water. And so what you'll do is you need to carry the board. Now, of course, it doesn't have a handle like a twin tip. So what I like to do is carry it upwind of yourself. So the wind's at my back. So I would move my board over onto this side, and that also allows me to carry the board with the opposite hand, meaning that I can still have my top hand on the bar, right? So it's easier to control and walk with the kite like this. And having the board, because it doesn't have a handle, having the board on my upwind side makes things a lot easier as well. Now, once you get down to the water, how do you go about water starting? So if you are a competent twin tip kite surfer, you're not going to have any trouble doing this really. It's very, very similar. Like we already talked about, the straps don't play a big role in actually riding the board, but there's a couple of little technique changes for getting up and getting started. And so the way we do it is when you get into the water, you'll put the board downwind of yourself, and very similar to the twin tip, we're going to be laying in the backwards like this in the water, and you, instead of having your feet in the straps, you sort of have your feet just sort of on the top like this, and you use your feet to control the board. So you might be moving the board around, steering the board, keeping it directly downwind of you. Kite's at 12. This means you can keep your hands on the bar to control the kite. Then we're going to do a water start just the same as normal, So we're going to dive the kite down a little bit, and then it's going to pull up, and as it pulls up, you're sort of rolling up on top of the board. So think of it like that. You're really rolling up to get up onto the board, and you can extend that front leg a little bit, and then what that will do is you'll allow you to tend downwind a little bit and then get on rail and start to carve back up into the wind. So it's very, very similar to how you do it with a twin tip, except the only difference is you don't have those foot straps, so you can be very mindful about controlling that board with your feet, and then when you get up, remember you're sort of rolling up onto the top of the board, tend downwind a little bit, and then turn up into the wind and get on rail. Now, one other difference is your feet positioning. So with a twin tip, you sort of position your feet like this, right? In the middle of the board, but with a directional board, you kind of want to have your feet towards the back, so it's more like this. Now, I move my feet sort of twice when I'm riding, typically. One is when I'm tacking, so just going across the water, just cruising along. I move my back foot forward a little bit, I'll sort of ride like that. And then when I'm turning, I actually move it back into the back of the pad. So turning's easier when you sort of move your foot back, or if you're about to go for a trick or jump. But when you're tacking, I find it's easier just to move your foot forward a little bit, and what that will do is it will stop the board sort of going on an angle like this as you're cruising along. You'll make it easier to go upwind and things like that. So the next step is, now you've got your water start and you're cruising along the water, how do you turn around? Okay, so this is obviously a directional board. Now, if you are familiar with riding toe side on your twin tip, you can just jybe, and then you can just switch your feet and then go back the other way. But if you're not familiar with toe side riding yet, then the most simple way to do it is you're cruising along, bring your kite up to 12, slow down, okay, jump off. So now you're in the water, turn the board around like that, and then same process again, control the board with your feet, and then you're going to water start up the other way. So that's a couple of tips for riding strapless for the first time. I've got to recommend it. It is so much fun, and once you get into it, it's addicting to like really progress your own level and all of the tricks and stuff that you can do, and anyone can really do it. You're going to find it's a lot easier than you might think, seeing other people riding around. Really easy to cruise around on strapless. Plus, of course, you can get out there in the waves and you can get into strapless freestyle, heaps of fun stuff. So I hope that that was helpful for a few tips to ride strapless for the first time. Luke here, and we'll see you in coming videos.